One thing Ineos have done well is they're trying to avoid Manchester United tax in the transfer window. If we're getting overpriced on a player, they will look at alternatives. Now, if you look at Braithwaite, Everton wanted over 70 million for Braithwaite. Man United were willing to pay up to 55 million for Braithwaite, which, considering his injuries, I mean, 55 million would have been a lot. We were willing to go 55 million on Braithwaite. Everton wanted 70 million plus. And we didn't cave. I think Everton saw what we did with Maguire and thought we would cave, and we went and got Euro for 50 million. Now, last summer, Brighton wanted 120 million for Baleba or something. Now, I wanted us to get Baleba, and I was like, oh, if we can get him for 70, 80 million, you push for it, because Baleba was off the back of a fantastic season. And Man United walked away from Baleba, and walking away from Baleba at 100 million plus was the right decision. The wrong decision was we didn't buy an alternative. At least when we walked away from Braithwaite, we got Euro. We walked away from Baleba. It was a disgrace that we didn't get an alternative. But Man United have proven, if you're going to overprice your players, we're not going to do what we did and pay 85 million for Anthony, 80 million for Maguire. We're going to have alternatives. That's why we've probably been linked to a number of players in a number of different positions. And while I am one of Sandro Tonali's biggest fans, he again hasn't had the best season this year, like Baleba. And Newcastle still want over 100 million for him. And I'm going to talk about that because I think United need to avoid making past mistakes. Walk away from someone like Tonali, because you can get the same output from Fernandes and Gomes for less money. We're going to talk about the updates on Tonali. We're going to talk about Anderson, why Man United have a plan to try and beat Man City to Anderson. We're going to talk about Man United's strategies, news on Stiller, news on Agate, and more. But in general, I want to talk about maybe the strategy and approach that I believe Manchester United need to take this summer. So, hello, and welcome back to Alice Talks Football, and welcome back to your 10-minute Manchester United news, transfer news, and update roundup show, where I'm going to share all the latest news, my thoughts and opinions in and around Manchester United in the next 10 minutes. Now, I want to dive into what Rob Dawson of ESPN has had to say in terms of what United's recruitment strategy is. So, Rob Dawson, he works for ESPN. He basically came out and said that recruitment is going to be more important than the manager decision internally, which I actually was speaking about in my live show last night. And he said Man United's goal is actually to use the money from outgoings, whether that be Agate, Højlund, Rashford, and Nana, to actually cover the big centre mid signing. Now, there's a feeling that there's going to be a 90 million centre mid signing and maybe a 40, 50 million centre mid signing. And he said that United want an elite centre mid and probably a second centre mid. No mention of a third midfielder. I think we need a third midfielder. I think we need an elite centre mid to replace Casemiro. I think we need an Agate replacement, and I think we need someone to compete with Maino. He said that Man United essentially want a left-wing version of Amad Diallo, a goalie if Onana and Bayandía leave. I would look at promoting Vitek, and squad depth needed for 4 comps next season. Well, if you want squad depth for 4 comps next season, buying 2 midfielders is not enough. We need to buy 3. But what he's basically saying is the money to cover Anderson, we're hoping would come from the sales of like Rashford, Højlund, Agate can cover Anderson. The rest of the budget can go and get the second midfielder, the left winger that's going to be like an Ahmad on the left wing, maybe a third midfielder to give us the depth, a left back or a centre back to give us the depth to compete with 5 fronts next season, potentially a goalie. But I would look at promoting Vitek. Now, I think Vitek should be used to replace Bayandía. I think Bayandía should go. I think we need a top-level midfielder, an Anderson, Tonali, Baleba. I say Baleba, he's dropped off this season. Type player to replace Casemiro. I think we need a Agate replacement and someone like Joao Gomes, and then a number 8 to challenge Kobe, whether that be Wharton, whether that be Mateus Fernandes, whether you look at a Lucas Bergvall if Tottenham go down. I think that's what we need in terms of what we could do. Maybe a left back or right back that can overlap. It doesn't have to be a left back because we do have the likes of Amas coming through, but I do think we need an attacking-minded fullback. I think a centre back for depth just because Licha and De Ligt are injury prone, and I think another attacker, if Xerxes goes, could be on United's list. But what's interesting is obviously there's a feeling that it could be Tonali. There's a feeling, internally, according to reports, that Anderson's more likely to pick City. Tonali's open to United. It's probably going to be Tonali, But the other reports are saying, well, United aren't going to overspend on Tonali. They like him, but they're not willing to break the bank for Tonali. Apparently, we're willing to break the bank for Anderson, but not Tonali. Newcastle want clarity early in the summer on Tonali. I think Newcastle got clarity that, look, if they don't get European football, Tonali will want to go. Newcastle's firm stance is 100 million minimum, won't sell below. Open to selling, but only on their terms, will stay if price not met. Now, Newcastle are putting this out on Tonali. Now, this is obviously a Newcastle brief on Tonali, and this follows reports after Man United said that they wouldn't want to spend huge money on Tonali. If it's going to be 100 million, they'd walk away. Manchester United said that. Manchester United have briefed Ben Jacobs on the fact that they are not going to overspend on Tonali. They would walk away like they have in the past if he's 100 million. I think Tonali, Last summer would have been 100 million plus. I think because he's not been as good this season, he's probably in that 80 million range. But it's Newcastle. They're not going to want to sell to a potential rival for anything less than 100 million. Look at the money they got for Isak. Unless Tonali really pushes for a move, I just think it could be in. I don't think they're going to sell for cheap. There has been rumours of there being potentially a clause in Tonali's contract if they're not in Europe, and there has been rumours that Newcastle may need to sell, and it would be Tonali or Livramento that they would sell. They wouldn't sell Hall or Bruno Guimaraes. But I do look at this, and I was looking at this, and I was like, I like Tonali. I think he's a phenomenal player, an unbelievable player. I mean, I think it's around 80 million. I think I would push for that 90-ish million. But if Newcastle start wanting 110, 115 million for Sandro Tonali, as much as I like Sandro Tonali, we have to look at what can we do realistically with that money, because we need 3 midfielders, and I think we can buy 3 midfielders if one is 80 million, one is 50 million, and one is 30 million. But I think if we go spend 115 million on a midfielder, I don't think we can do 3. And I think we should walk away from Tonali and go and sign Mateus Fernandes and Joao Gomes. Mateus Fernandes was unbelievable for West Ham yesterday. Mateus Fernandes, for me, I think in 2 years' time could be a much better player than Tonali. And I think deep down Tonali's an 8 and Mateus Fernandes is an 8 that could play 6, that could play 10, but he's an 8 for me. I think, honestly, maybe I'm crazy. I just think with Mateus Fernandes and Joao Gomes for 90 million combined, rather than spending 100 to 120 million on Tonali. Maybe that's just me, but I'm just thinking of depth, what we need to do. I just feel like we should walk away from Tonali. Unless we can get Tonali for 80, 90 million, then I would definitely go on it, because I think he's a great player. And I think we should just look to sign Mateus Fernandes and Joao Gomes instead of repeating past mistakes. Like, I look at Liverpool's rebuild under Klopp. They went and signed the Wijnaldums. They went and signed the Van Dijks. They went and signed the Robertsons. Robertson was the best player at Hull. Wijnaldum was one of the best players at Newcastle. Van Dijk was the best player at Southampton. And they went and signed the best of the rest. And Van Dijk was quite expensive, but Wijnaldum was a little bit cheaper. Robertson was a little bit cheaper. Mane, wasn't crazy expensive. They went and signed those players. And I think Mateus Fernandes is a very Liverpool-coded signing, in the sense of he's the type of player that Liverpool signed for 50 million, and then in 3 years' time, he's worth easily 100 million plus. Same with Joao Gomes. I just feel like, because I don't want Man United spending ridiculous money on a player that hasn't been in the best form this year, and this is coming from someone that rates Tonali, thinks he's unbelievable. Worst case scenario, you have to pay 100 million, you have to pay 100 million. I just think he's an 80 million player for me, because his form has dropped off quite a bit this season. I think Tonali is phenomenal. But if I'm seeing Mateus Fernandes in that 50 million range, Joao Gomes in that 30 million range, I'm thinking Mateus Fernandes, Joao Gomes, and then we have the funds after Mateus Fernandes and Joao Gomes to see if we can get Tonali. Best case scenario, you get Tonali, Mateus Fernandes, and Joao Gomes. But I almost think, get Mateus Fernandes and Joao Gomes out of the way. You've signed 2 of your midfielders. You've got a little bit of leverage. So if you come in for Tonali and Newcastle say 100 million plus, we just say, well, we've already signed the 2 midfielders and walk away. If we haven't signed anyone and we're trying to get Tonali, Newcastle are not going to budge on that 100 million price. If we've gone and signed 2 midfielders and we try and get Tonali, Newcastle may lower to an 80 million price because they'll realise we're not desperate. I just do think we have to, a little bit like we walked away from Brantford, a little bit like we walked away from Baleba. I think if they start taking the mick with the price tags, there is options out there. And I'm worried that these options in Fernandes and Gomes could be swooped up quick. Man City may be the front runner to sign Elliot Anderson, but Manchester United are prepared to compete for the deal. UCL revenues, in addition to planned offloading of Casemiro and Sancho at the end of the season, will put the club in a strong financial position to outspend rivals. Again, there's rumours that United, if we get Champions League football and with sales and with wages saved, we will be in a stronger position to potentially, give Anderson a very strong financial package, which maybe means we could beat City to a signature. In terms of other stories coming in, it was said that Mendes is pushing for Ugarte exit this summer. Ugarte struggled with minutes under Carrick. Again, another hint that Carrick could leave. So another hint that Carrick could be the next manager, because Ugarte is not even waiting to see who the next manager is. He's just expected to go. He's not getting minutes under Carrick. But I think that's also because Ineos want him out. United are likely to accept a loss to fund midfield rebuild. Apparently, United are willing to accept around 25 million for Ugarte. Ugarte is looking for moves. His agent's looking for moves. He's not getting a lot of minutes. Ugarte is expected to go as long as somebody bids up. And then last but not least, according to Sport Bild, Angelo Stiller is now ready to leave Stuttgart. And while he has a 34 million release clause, Stuttgart are probably going to pay him 2 million so they can get rid of that release clause. And Stuttgart will be looking for around 50 million for Angelo Stiller. Let me know your thoughts down below on all the news. But as I've said, I really like Tonali and I really like Anderson. And look, 80, 90 million, we go for them. But if those players start getting up to the 120 million range, you do look at Angelo Stiller, Mateus Fernandes, Manu Kone, Joao Gomes, Lucas Bergvall, Sander Berge, Agome, you do look at those other players and say, well, can we be more efficient with money? Because if we are in the Champions League next season, we're going to need a left back, a left winger, maybe another centre back for depth. We probably need 3 midfielders, not 2, if Casemiro and Ugarte go. I think we just have to be smart and not repeat past mistakes. Maybe I'm waffling, maybe you disagree. Let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching. Bye.